It is such an honor and a pleasure to be here with such an esteemed panel, three true experts. We're in for a real treat. And by way of introduction, I'm here in my capacity as an advisor to the South China Morning Post, but today's really special to me. I've lived 33 years in China. I was the CEO of a publicly listed media company in Hong Kong. I was a banker. I did all kinds of things, but most important was my formative years. And I spent them as a young kid, first in Butterworth in Malaysia, then as a Fulbright scholar in Singapore, where I had the chance to do a short-term exchange program in Bandung, and then, of course, finally ending in my professional career here in Hong Kong. So we're off to a great start. As our MC told us, please feel free to pull together any thoughts, any questions you might have, and I'll be delighted. I don't know where the tablet is, but eventually we'll have one, and happy to field your questions. So we're the last panel today, and I think what's really come out here is a theme about ASEAN, a theme about China, and as I hear it, all along the day we hear about collaboration, we hear about cooperation, and we hear about competitiveness. And with this in mind, it makes me think of ASEAN as really kind of a family. But within any family, and as the family grows, when I first studied here, ASEAN only had 5 members, then 6, and what are we up to now? A family grows. There are always drama inside family. So I thought that we'd start today listening to each one of our guests to speak about what they see as the opportunities, the challenges, and the threats that we might see, or the drama that we might see within the family of ASEAN, and what their approaches and their thoughts are about these opportunities and challenges. And I thought, since we're here in Jakarta, we'd start off with our Indonesian guest, Anyam Bakti. Maybe you can give us your thoughts.
First of all, thank you very much for having us here. And Honorable CY has been here for the whole day. So it shows also, just like what Indonesia says, Indonesia Inc., we also see Hong Kong Inc. Working together. So congratulations. I think when it comes to ASEAN, it reminds me when we go to certain places, especially in the United States, you see McDonald's, you see Wendy's, and Burger King in similar places, usually similar area. And one of the reasons why is because you want to enlarge the cake. To a certain extent, that is how we see ASEAN. So ASEAN is certainly not, a nice to have. It is a necessity. In fact, it is sort of like the recipe for resilience as well as competitiveness, right? Now, in itself, it is a country, a region of 700 million people, $4 trillion GDP, so it's sizable. In any size. Having said that, out of the 4 trillion GDP, which is about the same 4 trillion trade, only 22% is intra-ASEAN. So there is still a huge upside between ASEAN that we can do. And the third thing, we see also all countries in ASEAN, we see growth of both digital transactions as well as a growth of, for example, FDI, they are above the world average. So when we look at a country like Hong Kong, which has the largest trading partner being Southeast Asian, it is something that we don't take it lightly. We want to put our foot forward as much as we can. Now, at the corporations level, yes, we are competing in a way, but at the same time, it is something that we actually are happy when we see our neighbors are having a good play. I always am an admirer of Tengku Syafrul with his PM, a lot of times going out there and look, the results show. So we always say that, look, this collaboration between the minister as well as the PM back then was good. And we use that as an example to get ourselves better, and also we use it to convince our leaders. Or on the other hand, for example, we see that our trades with the outside world export about $250 billion. Oh, we feel good, right? But then we see Vietnam, 500 billion, is exactly double. So we say, hold on, what can we do more, not in order to make them go down, but how do we get there, right? The same thing with the 8% growth and so on and so forth. So I think one of the beauty about ASEAN is that the trust within the countries are there, and we don't mind to see our brother or sister succeed. And therefore, I think it is also easier for trading partners like Hong Kong or China to partner with us. And lastly, what I would like to say, in this geopolitics arena, fragmentation, disruption, Indonesia, as Pak Hashim also mentioned, is a non-aligned country. What does it mean? We are free and active, both sides, but when anything goes wrong, nobody's going to really help us. Not left, not right. So we got to stand in our own 2 feet. So when I said that ASEAN is also a source of resilience, that's what I mean. So among each other, you can say that we will bring peace and stability, we will bring growth. We need to get jobs for our people, but at the same time, we actually care about everybody to do well at the same time.
Thank you for that introduction. I will brought up some very interesting ideas, which we'll delve into a little bit deeper after, but I first want to give the other panelists a chance and turn to Tunku Zafrul and hear your thoughts. I'm going to let everybody in introduction talk about what you see as the opportunities, challenges, but maybe you'll give us a little insight to some of the family drama as well.
Okay, in fact, I agree with what Anin has said about ASEAN, the opportunities in ASEAN, especially when you look at the opportunities in trade and investment. Your question, Michael, is about drama, right? One drama that maybe I can share is, of course, Liberation Day, right? That was a test of ASEAN, ASEAN centrality, when President Trump announced the tariff on all countries, of course, all countries in ASEAN as well. How did ASEAN react, right? Because, as what Anin also said, we are a very much integrated economies within ASEAN. Yes, our intra-trade is very low, below 25%. Yes, our intra-trade for intra-investment is also low. But this is a test on how we react when there is a decision where it's unilateral in nature, and how do we react to that. So just in 10 days, I think less than that, ASEAN economic ministers sat down and planned on a response. Some may argue that there was drama where the response was a bit muted, but to me, the response showed that ASEAN stood together, right? 3 things was mentioned clearly. One is we were not in support of this unilateral decision. That means tariff is not the right way, not the right way to move forward. We also agreed to publicly and jointly announce that we will, continue to support in a multilateral rule-based trading system with WTO at its core. Of course, WTO has its challenges. And finally, we also agreed that we engage. Yeah. So this is the drama where how do you engage, right? You have, Trump had tariff at various rates. The floor was 10%, and of course Singapore was that 10. And then Malaysia, Indonesia, we were all in the same range even today. So that, I think, shows that sometimes it is difficult when, like what Anil also said, we need to also protect the interests of each country. But to me, opportunities are there. Of course, there are drama on the geopolitics side as well with Cambodia and Thailand, etc. But at the end of the day, we resolve not amicably yet, but still, we address by engaging. And final point, Michael, when you look at ASEAN, you cannot take for granted the success of ASEAN as a whole, right? The economic spillover of ASEAN being together. But the problem with ASEAN as well is sometimes the strength of ASEAN is also the weakness of ASEAN. So if you look at ASEAN today, people like us in this room, we will know what ASEAN is all about. But for politicians, I'm one. The problem is, how do you explain to the small guys, the SMEs, the medium enterprise, the people on the ground? They ask you, or they ask me, I'm sure they ask Anin as well, so what's ASEAN? What's ASEAN for me? So we need to address this, or else, ASEAN as a family, if people don't, because at the end of the day, there are 11 democracies here, or 11 countries here. The people demand the policy makers, the leaders of those countries, to explain why ASEAN benefit us. So I think that's also important, and how ASEAN also engage other countries. China is our largest trading partner, one of our largest investments. So it's important as well that we stick together when we engage other countries, especially some broad parameters on engagement. And we've done that. RCEP is a big example, the Regional Comprehensive Economic Partnership, where ASEAN plus China, plus Korea, plus Japan, Australia, New Zealand are in that. And of course, recently, last year, we upgraded the ASEAN-China FTA as well, which shows the commitment of ASEAN countries, ASEAN member states, when it comes to engaging, especially when it comes to economic collaboration with China.
Thank you. I'm just thinking now, we'll turn to Dr. Tong and say, how does China and Hong Kong fit in this whole mix? And where do you see yourself as part of this? And I'll just leave you with that open-ended.
Thank you. It's a good question. And I love how our fellow panelists have already highlighted the dynamics both between ASEAN and the rest of the world, and within ASEAN itself. Now, now that I'm here in Jakarta, let's focus on how I would see China versus or China with Indonesia. These two countries are the two of the four most populous countries in the world, and it combined for roughly 1/5, actually over 1/5 of the world's population. So by itself, it's already a big family. At the same time, while there are a lot of opportunities, a lot of potentials, the family members might not know each other very well. So, I think Hong Kong being the most open part of the country, it has a role to play in terms of brushing up the understanding of the cultures of both sides, and to facilitate the understanding and interactions of both sides. That's really just the scene setting. Now, we're representing the Financial Services Development Council, which is an advisory body set up by Mr. C.Y. Leung when he was Chief Executive of Hong Kong. I think we have a role to play in terms of facilitating financial capital flow between the regions. Hong Kong is one of the top financial centers around the world, and it is essentially, undebatably, the only international financial center in this time zone. So to me, I think what we should be doing is to focus on the opportunities and risk on like investing in and doing business with different countries in this region. The role of Hong Kong can play is first, in terms of our capital market, it is fantastic. We have a full-blown list of listed equities, from countries such as China, US, Europe, and many other regions. Obviously, many of those from Indonesia being listed there. Listing is only the start. What it means is that firms listed in Hong Kong can have access to the capital, but also the consumers present in China, for instance. I would encourage more firms from this part of the world to either consider secondary listing or dual primary listing in Hong Kong. For dual primary listing potential issuers, they are eligible for direct access from the Southbound Stock Connect scheme. And we are, at this juncture, talking to different stakeholders in Hong Kong to see whether or not the secondary listing can also be considered for the inclusion in Southbound Stock Connect scheme. I think this is very important because China is not only a mega market, it is also a mega investor. Looking at the potential of the patient capital, the insurance firms, and also the pension funds that are investing out of China to the rest of the world. This is a fantastic opportunity for funds and issuers to tap into. Now, in terms of risk, Hong Kong is also the risk management center, not only because we have the free flow of capital, but the financial instruments are also quite advanced. So if you want to use any sort of derivatives and options and such to hedge the risk, I don't think you can find a place that is more accessible than Hong Kong. So, for a country like Indonesia with, close to 300 million people living here, there's a lot of potential risk. We are also facing the risk in association with climate. I think, Hong Kong can serve that purpose and help alleviate some of those risks.
Thank you. So here's what I'm going to do. Thank you so much for that sort of broad, landscape overview. I'm going to ask a few questions, and then, of course, I'm going to open it up to the audience and see what they have. But I think one of the most important things that I want to first thank SCMP for convening this kind of a discussion is there's a lot of misinformation, there's a lot of disinformation, and it's so important for us to get fact-based news, that people can actually form an opinion based on the facts, not based on some of their own sort of social media ideas. And one of the things is there's a lot of misperceptions. I'd like to talk about the Belt and Road Initiative and how you perceive it, both from a Chinese perspective outward. What is Belt and Road Initiative? And to ask our other esteemed guests, how do they feel on the receiving end? Is this a gift? Is it an opportunity? Or is it a challenge and more of a threat? So maybe if I'll start with Dr. Tong and see how you think about what it means.
Thank you. From our perspective, it's notably not a strategy for the nation itself, but actually for the world. It is about a collaboration. It is about connecting with different parties without, the borders, right? Without considering the borders. Now, that is really about the flow of capital, information, people, services, goods, and whatnot. I think to that end, in order to make an attempt to do all of that, infrastructure is something that is very important. You think about how high-speed train has developed and advanced the people's life, alleviating poverty, mitigating a lot of risk for people and businesses in the country alone. That is really an example of how improved infrastructure can bring to the table. Now, with that in mind, I think some media would not consider it that way, and it is I'm empathetic. But to me, I think this is what we have to tell. It is a real, true story of the Belt and Road. And therefore, in Hong Kong, we have the Belt and Road Commissioner who is very active, and he is going abroad not only to develop places or our Southeast Asian region, but also to places where there aren't direct flights. Why he is doing it, it is really to brush up the understanding, but also to bring businesses from one place to another. I think this is a start. We have a long road to go, but then I hope we can pave the way for a more prosperous future for everyone.
Okay, I will look to Anyam Bakri. You're here. You see China growing its presence here. You see its impact. We talked about high-speed rail being the first. How do you feel representing on your behalf, how do people and enterprise in Indonesia accept this and feel it and take it in, and how do they feel about this kind of an initiative?
I think it's much, much more positive than any neutral or negative comments with BRI. The joke will be, at least it's a better discussion than tariff negotiation, right, with BRI. Now, past weekend, we just finished supporting APEC China, because APEC chairmanship this year is in China, in Shenzhen in November. So they go by these taglines: open, connectivity, and synergy, right? So I find, as you asked the question about BRI, I think it has something to do with it, right? Now, this Belt and Road Initiative, yes, the hard infrastructure is needed. You mentioned about the high-speed train, right? But also, I think the software infrastructure, or the soft infrastructure, is also as important. The digital innovation. We talked a little bit about how ASEAN level, about $250 billion GMV, growing 15% and all that. That's big, especially in the era of AI, right? And then also the intellectual infrastructure. We need our human capital to quickly go up the value chain if we were, to do this industrialization of anything, from critical minerals, agriculture, and so on. And I think the event like this is very important to have somewhat like a good narrative to the world, also to the West, to make sure that they know, we are not only together, but we benefit from each other, and we come up stronger. So let me just give you one or two quick examples, right? Just like in the last 2 weeks, the comment from MSCI came to the capital market, Moody's. I agree, a lot of things have to be done, especially in a country of 1.4 trillion US dollars trying to grow 5, 6, 7%. But I think we need at least, in the words of power generation, a base load. We need a base load of like, investors. And I think what you're saying, about the amount of investors in Hong Kong and China, it's good to have resilience for a country like Indonesia, which is trading about $1 billion. I believe Hong Kong about 30 billion, and then China 300 billion. That's a good base that probably will look at narrative that's longer term than shorter term. So I think that's how we see it from this end.
Okay, maybe I can turn to Malaysia. So, Tengku, you have a new role leading MIDA, right? And I'm curious how you see BRI intertwining with MIDA's own objectives and goals. Has there been an impact? Do you see it? What are your priorities for MIDA, and do you see a role for BRI in that?
Well, I think BRI is not something new, right? We have talked about this for a while now. I think to measure the success of BRI is to measure the outcome of that BRI. And we've seen, for example, trade. China has always been ASEAN's largest trading partner, but now ASEAN is also the largest trading partner for China. And what Anin also said, you also said about trade, that's important. But I think for BRI to continue to be successful, it has to be win-win, right? Today, the debate, if I can be very honest, is who gets, in a way, better access to markets. We need to look and be honest about whether ASEAN itself is strong enough to compete on certain industries. We talked about energy, for example. Some people talked about, other sectors as well, semiconductor, but even simple sectors, low-value goods sectors. These are issues which we need to address. ASEAN has a large trade deficit with China. So how does BRI help reduce that trade deficit? How? So that's one, right? Secondly, I think people-to-peoples are also important. I'm one product because I think a few of my Indonesian friends and Singapore friends as well, Thai friends, all participated in this BRI course in Tsinghua University, right? So I think, Anin, you're part of it as well, right? Yeah, so but people-to-people, it helps, right? So to sustain this, the trust has to be there. Because businesses, they have commercial objective, obviously, but we need to go beyond commercial objective to sustain the long-term relationship between ASEAN and China, and of course, to ensure that BRI continues to be relevant. So for Malaysia, for my role in MIDA, we look at investments coming into the country and supporting Malaysian companies going abroad as well. So of course, China, does help in supporting that objective. But for us, it's also important for ASEAN to together look at opportunities with China to a third country, right? Yes, BRI can also be something that we do partnership going to Africa or to Europe, right? So these are areas where maybe we can expand the partnership as we start with, bilaterally within China and Indonesia, or China and Malaysia, or China, Malaysia, Indonesia going to another country in ASEAN. But we can also look at opportunities, BRI being partners, to look at markets outside the BRI itself.
Interesting. So, I heard in the beginning, some of you talk about, the first thing you talked about, Liberation Day. So one of the things I think that's on top of mind for everybody here is how do countries like Malaysia, Indonesia, China, how do they navigate this global tension? How do you, we've talked about this during the day, but are you guys forced to choose? And if so, how do you maybe give us a little insight and think about what are the top priorities for sustained development and what does it mean for you, given that you're smaller countries compared to China, compared to the United States? Do you see enterprise here pivoting away from the US and turning towards China? Or do you see them still trying to navigate the middle road? I'd like to take it. Go ahead.
Thank you. First, for Indonesia, the biggest trading partner is China, with about, I think, $160 billion of trade. And then the second largest is the US, $40 billion. So we got to make sure that we navigate between these top two trading partners, whoever they are. So with the US, that means you have to negotiate smartly. We hope very soon we can get a fair deal, right? I think the framework is already there. And the same thing with China right now with whatever strategy, BRI, China plus one, we want to do more. And we want to not only trade, but also have cross-border investments. Yeah. And I think with Hong Kong, now it can be also both sides. Because I think Hong Kong can be not only a trading partner, but a place to demystify a lot of things in China. Unlike in many other places, I think Indonesians, we are still new in terms of expansionary mood in business. But we don't stop there. We need to open up other channels, for example, with European Union. And the interesting about European Union, the size is as big, if not bigger, and we are selling almost the same thing. It's the garment, textile, footwear, furniture, electronics. So it is a good way to hedge, and if both things work, to expand capacity. And the same thing with Canada and Eurasia. And plus also, somehow we see that Indonesia is really feeling comfortable in BRICS platform. Not only the good relationship at the top level between leaders, but also I think the South-to-South collaboration, they understand each other, they trust each other. So I'm not surprised that this can also grow along with their influence in the G20 platform.
Well, Hong Kong is a part of China, but we run under the two systems. So I think we do have a very special role to play in this, quite an uncertain world. Now, what we have been doing is to brush up our own efforts, because for a small but open economy like Hong Kong, we are a price taker. But, as we look at China as a country, it's a price setter. So what Hong Kong needs to do is to both, work alongside the national strategy, but be open to and continue to connect with the old friends. What we have been doing at the Financial Service Development Council, for instance, is as follows. We not only make new connections with our friends in the Middle East, in ASEAN, but also stay connected and address the misunderstanding or misconception of Hong Kong by the developed markets in the West. This is very important, like the direct and honest conversation, not necessarily under the spotlight, but like in a closed-door setting. These are the things that we have been doing, and I think we need to continue such, if not to brush up such efforts.
In the interest of time, I just wanted to take one or two questions that have come up in the audience, and then give you a chance to close up. But we have both Malaysia and Indonesia have their own unique strategies. And two senior people from Malaysia and Indonesia, can you see the question yourself? They said, can you dig down and be a little bit more specific? It's very nice to hear these generalities, everything is win-win. But can you think of anything that you're actually collaborating on now that is truly an example of win-win?
Okay. Well, of course, Malaysia, Indonesia, we have a very special relationship. Both countries, we have many friends. I mean, we speak same language in a way, right? The same rumpun. So there is chemistry. That one we can't deny. But also, there's also means that we have opportunities to work closer together. If you look at Indonesia and Malaysia, from the perspective of Malaysia, I hope Anin will agree with me, that let's look at government first. I think G2G, we are, if you look at the two leaders, they're very close, and we have seen how both have also the right chemistry to make sure that ASEAN and Malaysia and Indonesia relationship at the highest level gets stronger, becomes stronger. And business to business, Malaysian companies have been heavily invested in Indonesia for a while now. Let it be banking or telecommunication, etc. There have been many, even plantation. There are many Malaysian companies who are heavily invested in Indonesia. And why? The reason because they trust that this is a long-term play when it comes to economic benefit. There, with Indonesia's projected economic growth, with Indonesia's demographic, Indonesia is a place for Malaysian companies to invest, right? And recently there was even an announcement for the first time in the telecommunication industry, two big telco companies merged, Malaysia and Indonesia. I think all of you know which ones. And it shows that, for Malaysia, Indonesia, now we can move to the next level where no longer just Malaysia taking over or investing alone, but we can work together and with other markets. So for me, business definitely there. And finally, people to people again, I like to talk about people to people because, this is so important for us to sustain what we have already built over decades. So Malaysia, Indonesia, they have their own unique strength, no doubt, right? We complement each other in many ways. But at the same time, Malaysia really needs a strong Indonesia because Indonesia, with its populations, with its GDP size, this is also a market for ASEAN and a market for Malaysia to continue to improve on our economic growth as well.
I think we could go on and on. I'm mindful of our time here. We've been very fortunate to have such insightful thought leaders, really true leadership to give us some things to think about. But one of the values of today is for all of you to continue to collaborate and to have onward discussions and a chance to further discuss these topics. So I'm afraid we have to end it here, but I hope that the dialogue and discussion continues. And a big thank you to my panelists here. It's been an honor and a privilege.
Thank you very much, gentlemen.